very warm welcome to all of you in the name of the ETC of the university. You have it here, European Training and Research Center for Human Rights and Democracy. It's a bit long name, but if you try hard, you will remember it. And we have one branch of it, of the University of Graz, which is the main organizer of this event tonight. However, together with others, like in particular the Faculty of Catholic Theology, and in particular there the Institute for Religious Science, the Afro-Asian Institute, and also the Islamic Cultural Center. Graz has declared itself in 2001 a human rights city. So also I want to emphasize that since 2001 Graz works on this identity of the first European human rights city. And this says something also about our topic today, because we are quite proud of very good interreligious relations, a good interreligious dialogue in this city, which so far has avoided any clashes between different religions. And we have certainly an increasing number of Muslims also in this country and in this city, but we also have a Buddhist group here in Graz, and you can find many other religions. And maybe due also to a former mayor, but also to the present one, this always has been very high on the agenda. And so I was just in Brussels at a conference which was a dialogue between the League of Arab States and the European Union. And we were discussing freedom of expression and freedom of religion and the conflicts which can exist between the two. And I could proudly say that we are one of those cities in Europe where we are just seeing a mosque being built, and this was even with the explicit support of the city government and its mayor. And I think this is something which is important. Unfortunately, there are always efforts and groups who create difficulties or who create problems for this good living together. And for the people who are from Graz, I really have to say that this, what some of us found today in our newspaper, is very disturbing. I mean, it's a political party which uses the forthcoming elections to create Islamophobia and to create fear in order to present itself afterwards as the one who will protect the people against somebody like this, who, however, is not really in any way a threat. So now I have already heard that the mayor of Pusterwald, this is the nice little village who seems to be threatened by this guy, has complained because they were not asked if they want to be on that picture, and they don't see themselves at all in such a situation. And there are many more such montage pictures in there which don't reflect the reality at all. And I'm sorry about this, because it has a potential to undermine the good efforts which have been made in Graz, in Styria, in our country in general, for the good living together of the religions. And one who has some merits in this will pick after me. It's Bert Groen from the Institute of Religious Science of our theological faculty, and who holds also the UNESCO chair in intercultural and interreligious dialogue for Southeastern Europe. This is something which is important when we are in Graz, because we are proud that we have very good relations with this region. And I was personally also involved after the war in the Balkans in helping to bring this dialogue among the confessions in the region, but also with Graz. The faculty had a big role at the time. We had several conferences, once in Sarajevo, once in Graz, And so it's so good that you continue these activities and put it even on a wider level. So I'm very pleased that you are here with us and will speak after me, introducing a bit what is going on in our region and what your chair is doing. And now I would like to welcome in particular somebody who is a bit hiding in the back, but this is our special guest of today, Ashok Panikkar, from India in general, but more particular, was it Bangalore? Or
Bangalore.
Yeah, Bangalore, where he is heading the Meta-Cultural Conflict Resolution Center. He is a frequent traveler, as we have found out, because he travels a lot in the United States, in Europe, and it seems that what he's doing is very much in demand. When I looked at your CV, I was quite intrigued by the master you did on critical and creative thinking. And I was thinking that this is something we should do with all our students. Sometimes we miss a bit this dimension, but this is something which is very important, I think, for academics. And then you have a long teaching experience both in India and in the United States in international conflict resolution, cross-cultural negotiations, creative writing, critical thinking, mediation, and we'll use your services in the next 2 days by our University Competence Center to work on mediation issues with them. In the interreligious context, this becomes more and more important, these skills, and so we are very grateful that you will share your experiences with us in a moment. And certainly we are all very curious to know more about your Meta-Cultural Center with the vision of changing the culture of discourse. Often I think this is exactly what we need, and then we have setbacks like that. Yeah. So thank you very much for making yourself available, and I ask Bert first to speak to us, and then we'll ask for you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will speak to you about interreligious context, interfaith dialogue in Southeastern Europe, or as we say often, in the Balkans. But for some of us, the Balkans has kind of a negative meaning. The Balkans means a place of conflict, a place of being a bit backward. That's not what we mean with the Balkans, but it kind of has, for a lot of people, this emotional association. Let's get to business. I will speak about Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in Southeastern Europe. Some challenges for interfaith relations. A short introductory note. In Southeastern Europe, we find many diverse countries and nationalities, as well as different language communities, diverse cultures, and various religions, especially Christianity, that is Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant denominations mainly, Judaism, and Islam. On the one hand, one can observe a fascinating blend of cultural traditions in literature, in music, in cooking, in customs, in trade, and so on. And this mixture is also visible in multi-religious, especially mixed Christian-Islamic places of pilgrimage, for instance. On the other hand, one finds a great deal of division, tension, and numerous conflicts. Religious factors and cultural idiosyncrasies are often mentioned as one of the possible explanations of these conflicts. And just as elsewhere, also in Southeastern Europe, there is a tendency to speak pro domo, for me, and to prove that one's own religious community and one's own ethnic community is right. Accordingly, the issue I'm addressing here is delicate. Quantitatively, today the most important denominations, for those who are not so much familiar with Southeastern Europe, today the most important denominations on the Balkan Peninsula are Christian Eastern Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism and Islam. In Bulgaria, Greece, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, in Montenegro, Romania and in Serbia, Orthodoxy is the dominant religion. In Croatia and Slovenia, the Roman Catholic Church is the most important denomination. In the narrow sense of the word, the latter two countries are not really considered as parts of the Balkans, because they did not belong to the Ottoman Empire. Although, of course, there was a great deal of socio-economic and cultural exchange with that Ottoman Empire, and therefore also mutual influence. Furthermore, in Bosnia, in Kosovo, and in the European part of Turkey, Islam dominates. In Albania, we meet with both Islam and Christianity, mainly Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. Important Islamic minorities exist in, inter alia, Bulgaria and in Greece. Until the Second World War, in Southeastern Europe, Jewish communities have been flourishing. However, for the greater part, they were destroyed by the Nazis and the regimes that cooperated with the Nazis. In Thessalonica, for instance, until the war, over 50,000 Jews have been living, but nearly all of them have been killed in the concentration camps. Although also the sizable Bulgarian Jews were discriminated and many of them were deported to working camps, most Bulgarian Jews were able to survive the Shoah. However, after the war, nearly all of them emigrated to Israel. Yet, the actual disappearance of Jewry did not mean the end of anti-Semitism, which is usually latent, but sometimes comes out full into the open. Generally speaking, I mean, we could deal now with all these countries and talk about the situation of interreligious faith, interfaith contacts and so on. But then we would be here till tonight. And the concentration point tonight is India and your work. So this is just a foreplay.
Don't let me stop you. Go on.
Generally speaking, in Southeastern Europe, I come to some general judgment. In Southeastern Europe, interreligious and interdenominational relations are far from being well developed, On the one hand, there are tolerance, there's hospitality, occasional encounters between the leaders of the different denominations, as well as a certain degree of ecumenical and interreligious cooperation. On the other hand, denominational fundamentalism and lack of knowledge of other religions and confessions are widespread. Yet, in my opinion, the Southeastern European interreligious performance records are not worse than those in most other countries of this world. Where are interfaith encounters and dialogues really well developed and satisfying for all parties involved? Are questions such as how much otherness can a nation accept? And are heterogeneous elements a threat or an enrichment? Are these questions not relevant for all states? In almost all countries, the fact that diverse religious, ethnic and cultural groups are heterogeneous and different from others is a tremendous social and political challenge. Indeed, it is a challenge to see reality through the glasses of other religious and non-religious movements, and to deal creatively with the tension between the cultural, social and theological differences and the basic unity of all humankind. I myself am a Dutch national. Also in the Netherlands, a country traditionally known to many people abroad as liberal, as tolerant, presently there is rapidly increasing tension between openness to foreign cultures and primarily preserving the own Dutch identity. More and more Dutch feel threatened by the influx of alien elements, especially Muslims, and they demand that the latter's immigration and integration be strictly regulated. A comparison between the fairly peaceful Christian-Muslim relations in Bulgaria and Greece on the one hand, and the rather bloody conflicts in Bosnia, in Kosovo, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia on the other, makes clear that interreligious and interethnic tolerance in Southeastern Europe cannot be taken for granted. Especially the Bulgarian and the Greek models are very precious. Also because they show that Islam essentially belongs to Europe, essentially belongs to the European identity. Nevertheless, probably one should also use common sense and soberly remark that also in Bulgaria and Greece, interfaith tolerance rather has a negative, a passive character than a positive, an active one. What do I mean? The heads of the religious communities and many faithful pragmatically coexist, and at the same time painstakingly take care to keep the differences, and they continuously warn of blending. No blending. Just as in other European countries, the relations between the Islamic community and the rest of the population, also in Bulgaria and Greece, in my opinion, remain delicate and ambivalent. I come to a final question. As for the former communist countries, Albania, Bulgaria and Romania in particular, these three, should not the enormous common suffering of all religious communities, of all of them, and their numerous blood witnesses during the communist dictatorship, should they not serve as bridges to common understanding, not to isolation movement? Should they not be a solid base for interreligious and ecumenical rapprochement, cooperation, mutual respect and tolerance, for common witness? After all, religion should not be concerned with fighting for national and ethnic interests, as we can observe so often. Concerned with issues of dominant, traditional religion. Who is the dominant religion? They should not be concerned with ecclesiastical structures of power, but with service to God and to fellow humans. Individual religious freedom is also essential. It is a most costly good, not always regarded as such in the world religions and in the churches. It is an indispensable element in any modern interreligious training. Openness, respect of other religious convictions and of non-religious convictions. Interdenominational and interreligious formation are a conditio sine qua non in a multi-religious society. Own identity and otherness belong together. And only in a dialectical relationship, both can spiritually grow. Thank you.
So now let's hear from you, please.
Just start.
As soon as we get the technology going. Thank you. Thank you. First, thank you, Dr. Groen and Benedek, for setting the tone with these conversations. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for organizing this whole thing. I mean, this is, I'm very grateful to have had an opportunity to talk with you and to share some of our experiences at two levels. One is interreligious conflict resolution and dialogue. And I'm hoping that over the next 40-45 minutes, I will be able to, I hope you don't mind, I'll move around a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
I hope I can keep up with you here.
Yeah, I'm not very good at standing still. So again, I'm really delighted to be here for a range of reasons, and I have to confess, I didn't know as much about your center sitting in Bangalore until I reached here. So I feel very privileged to be in the presence of a group and multiple groups that are actually focused on such critical issues. I didn't know that since, what was it, 1981, Graz was a human rights city. 2001. I mean, the more I learn about Graz, the more grateful I am that I got a chance to visit. I have to confess, and don't think too badly of me, I didn't know of Graz until we started communication with Lisa. So I am really very excited. And I have to say, just the last 3 days that I've been walking around, I am, I think I'm starting to fall in love with your little city. Okay, so I would like to today share with you our experiences at Metaculture with dealing with the very complex religious or interreligious environment or climate in India. So in India, basically, just to give you a background, about 80% of the population is Hindu. Another 10 to 15% is Muslim, and another 3 to 4% is Christian. Now, when you talk of 1.2 billion people, 3 to 4% can be quite a bit. And to just give you a context, I grew up in the southernmost state of India called Kerala. And Kerala is notorious for having the world's first democratically elected communist government, okay, in the late 1950s. And the literacy levels and the social indices in Kerala are very high. In fact, infant mortality and health is better than most first world countries. At the same time, I know my people too well. We can be a little difficult to get along with. Now, a couple of things about Kerala in terms of religion. At least 30 to 35% is Muslim. Another 20-25% is Christian, and the rest are Hindu. So once when I was growing up, to the left of my father's house, my parents' house, was a Christian family, and to the right was a Muslim family. And through the 70s, growing up, there were no interreligious problems. Particularly in cities like, in states like Kerala, everybody got along extraordinarily smoothly, and we never thought of looking at someone else as belonging to a different religion. There were very few burqas or even hijabs, and that's completely changed in the last 10 to 15 years. The separation of the religious groups and the lack of mingling has actually become pretty acute. So that's, and the whole interreligious climate in India in the last, I would say, 20-25 years has become pretty problematic. It's become a security issue. So that's one. I'd like to share some of our experience there. But beyond that, I would also like to share with you about our experiments with dialogue. When we normally talk about dialogue, in our minds, something comes about a certain kind of conversation. And this is my field. I work as a mediator and a facilitator, and I've been doing this for 25 years. And so we've experimented with different ways in which people, groups that disagree with each other can actually talk with each other. And I'd like to share that with you. Okay? So, can I knock these lights out?
Sure.
Just this row, unless it goes this way, in which case we can't do anything. Okay, I guess that's the best we can do. No.
I try. It's okay to. No? Okay.
Okay. What would you rather see, this or me? Come on, make up your minds. Okay, so I'd just like to say, incidentally, we just completed 10 years. Metaculture is an organization I founded in 2005 to deal with two things. Improve the way human beings think and engage with each other. It came out of my experiences in critical thinking, creative thinking, and conflict resolution. So for many years, particularly when I was in the US, I was focused on conflict resolution until I realized that's what you do when things go wrong. And there has to be a better way in which we can work with societies, work with people, to equip them to deal with conflict as a living issue, rather than dealing with conflict after everything is crumbled or things have gotten really difficult. So today that's what we do. We try and work not just in India but in other countries about helping through many conflict resolution methodologies like consensus building, relationship management, and dialogue. And I will talk a little bit about this later. So I did give you a very quick sense about Hindu, Christian and Hindu-Muslim relations. Suffice to say that while Hindus are the overwhelming majority in India, there is a sense that Hindus have not had power in India for centuries. Starting with the invasions from Central Asia, Persia, and the rule of different Islamic dynasties. Pretty much about 700 to 800 years, India was run, or many parts of India were actually ruled by Muslim rulers. About 250 years ago, the Christians came, not just the British, but in parts of India, the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French. And so for the last 250 years, until independence in 1947, India was ruled mostly by Christian rulers. What is important and unique about India is that when we got independence in 1947, firstly, I'd just like to say, if I'm speaking too fast in English, stop me. Okay? Okay. Don't be polite. Okay. So, in 1947, we got independence from the British. And we were very lucky to be ruled by very secular intellectuals. They were mostly Fabian socialists, very influenced by British democracy, American democracy, and they insisted that India will not become a Hindu republic. They were very clear that India would become a secular republic. And on top of it, that India's diversity would be protected. And there were extraordinary laws. I can't imagine very many countries at that point in history who had very powerful laws to protect minorities. But this was possible because after the British were gotten rid of, actually they walked away on their own, but we like to think we got rid of them. There was a sense of national unity. Two, as I said, the Indian leaders were extremely sophisticated, very philosophic, very secular. Over the last 30 to 40 years, that has changed. It's changed because the initial enthusiasm of the Hindu community to secularism has taken a beating. There has been increasing resentment of the so-called benefits that have been given to minorities, particularly other religious groups, Christians and Muslims primarily. And this has coincided with a rising Hindu nationalism. So, over the last 30 years, there's been a revival of both political Hinduism as well as a very aggressive nationalism. Partly, of course, if you look at it, developing countries, anywhere in the world are tired of basically Western domination. So one of the things that most parts of the world experiences a pride in their own identity, their ethnic, their geographic identities. So, this has created a tremendous amount of stress in the country. Between the stresses between the Christians and the Hindus are very different from the stresses between the Muslims and the Hindus. So, I'm going to show you I'm going to touch upon two dialogues that we did. About 3.5 years ago, we started a dialogue between Hindus and Christians. And the challenges there are, as I said, very different from the one that we started about 1.5 years ago between Muslims and Hindus. Okay? So once we do this, what I'd like to do is also share with you what I think is necessary if we genuinely want to work on coexistence. This is not an Indian problem. It's not a European problem. It's a global problem today. The world we live in, we don't have a choice. We are diverse. The question is, how do we negotiate our differences? And how do we manage to coexist? A lot of us sitting in this room, I think by virtue of the fact that we come for a talk like this, we believe in heterogeneity. We believe, I'd be surprised if somebody didn't believe in diversity. And at the same time, I have to say, and another area that I've been working on for 20 years is diversity and cross-cultural engagement. And I pardon my Sanskrit, but if I might be allowed to use a strong word, diversity is wonderful when you're eating somebody else's food or wearing their clothes or trying out their earrings or their scarves. But to get along with each other, diversity is a bitch. It really makes life tough. It really does. There's nothing easy about diversity. If you get married to someone from another ethnicity, you know what I'm talking about. If in your neighborhood you have people who are very different from you in the house next door, you know you need to manage it. So we can't, after so many years of doing this, there's one thing that I have started appreciating, which is there are no easy solutions. And I say this all the time, I love John Lennon, but his music will not help me solve the problems. You know, really. Simple idealism will not work. We need to be very hard-nosed about it. And we have to be extraordinarily pragmatic and tough. Otherwise, we can't deal with genuine diversity. So I'll just quickly go through what I call the provocations that informed some of our work. In 2007, we ran an interreligious dialogue in Bangalore between Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Buddhists. And one of the things that we discovered, this was a pilot, and we ran it for about 4 months, the same group. When I say dialogue, here's what I mean. We select a group of people who are representatives of different different religious groups. We try to get a good mix of people, and we keep them at the table for multiple sessions, because an isolated conversation is not a dialogue. Dialogue is very difficult to really make happen. And the way we define dialogue, it's not a conversation. It is a very structured, facilitated process. Okay? So, we did this, and one of the interesting things that we discovered was, in the beginning, everybody is polite with each other. Everybody is polite. Everybody says sweet things about the other religion. But you start scratching, and then the fangs come out. And then you see also extraordinary contempt. It's not so much hatred as much as contempt. How can you believe in this God? How can you do this? Okay? And this was shocking for us. Because like a lot of people, we came into this work thinking everybody really wants to get along wonderfully with each other. We are all human beings. And the scriptures say pretty much the same things, or at least we thought. And so we were surprised when we found, upon digging, this kind of intensity. We had the opportunity, okay, in 2008, there were very strong riots in the eastern part of India between Christians and right-wing Hindu groups. And it was a complex one. I don't want to go into the complexity right now. We were hired by a Christian organization, an international Christian organization, to go and do a conflict analysis. So we spent 2 months talking to everybody from the archbishop to the missionaries to the families that were actually refugees in their own state. There were thousands of people who were driven out of their villages and who were hiding in the forest because they were scared of coming back. Okay? We also met some right-wing Hindu leaders who were accused of murdering the Christians. We went to the jails and we interviewed them. And if you folks are interested, I can, share our report with you another time. But, essentially, the interesting thing was, we found in both the stories that the Christians said, the Hindus said, the ones who were recently converted into Christianity, we found extraordinary humanity coexisting with cruelty. That it was difficult to pinpoint good people and bad people. That the good were equally capable of a certain kind of badness and vice versa. I know it sounds cliched, but we also discovered that it was what came across as a religious issue was not just religious, it was territorial, it was economic, it was social. There were multiple angles that were there. Now this was not a dialogue, this was only a conflict analysis. But it really affected it informed us in terms of the complexity. Then in 2008, there were a series of attacks on churches in Bangalore and Karnataka, the state that I live in. And this was while the right-wing party, which today is running the country, the BJP, was in power in our state, in Karnataka. And they authorized an official report, the Somashekar report, which basically said the right-wing groups didn't have anything to do with it. It was a whitewash. And the Christians were extremely upset with us. Not only were they attacked, many of them died, and their churches were attacked, the people were attacked, but there was no accountability. And when this happened, what we found was the church and the Christian communities, there were only two things that they were resorting to. They were resorting to public protest by going onto the streets and walking to the governor's house and protesting. And they were taking it up in the courts, both of which are completely useful and legitimate. But we asked ourselves, is this enough? What are we accomplishing by only protest and litigation? Is there any other way in which issues like this could be addressed in society? And that's when we figured it's important to genuinely engage in dialogue between people who do not agree with each other. Until now, most of what passed off as the dialogue was between people who agreed. All the human rights groups came together, all the activist groups, and they talked about how terrible the other side was. And I don't consider it dialogue. That's a nice coffee opportunity. Real dialogue is when you sit across the table from people who can't stand you, who disagree with you, and if you can have those difficult conversations. Okay? And since then, from 1947, but particularly in the last 20 years, India has become very, very different. All sections of the country have become very intolerant. One way in which the intolerance comes out is the separating of groups, the ghettoization. The real heterogeneity is actually disappearing. You have pockets. Two, you have a tremendous amount of what I call competitive offensiveness. Because India is a democracy, and it's a democracy which is not an extraordinarily strong state internally. Any group can ban any book, any speaker, any film, if it offends them. It's Charlie Hebdo on acid. Anything can be banned. If you are upset with something, all you have to do is send a mail or letter, and 5 people will join you and walk on the street, and there's a chance it will be banned. Because the state is not confident of dealing with potential law and order problems if any group is upset. So, in other words, diversity is disappearing from society. It's there, but it's all getting marginalized. All getting marginalized. So, moving on, let me see if this works, okay? There's a funny video I'd like to show you. Oh, sorry, how does this work? Ah. Is the sound? Oh, this, okay. One sec. Can we have, do we have audio?
I actually didn't know that you wanted.
I'm so sorry, my mistake. But do we have speakers here?
No.
Okay. If you don't have speakers, don't worry about it. It's supposed to be a silent movie anyway.
Okay.
Okay? Kind of like Charlie Chaplin or from the silent movie era. But the music was interesting. Just imagine the music. You know, especially...
The laptop has speakers, no?
One sec. Okay, let me see if the laptop speakers are there.
Here is the audio sign on the right side on the bottom.
Oh, right side bottom.
Just up.
Up here? Oh yes, I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Don't worry about it. Just imagine Charlie Chaplin movie. I mean, music. Good. Trust me, it's so much more interesting with the music. But, you know, one of the things that, I don't know if it's common here in Europe, but India is full of inter-religious dialogue. And here's what happens. something like this. They call a Christian priest, they call a mullah from the Islamic faith, and they call a Hindu priest. And there's a pedestal, because we are a hierarchical society, it cannot be flat. We have a pedestal, and each of these three venerable gentlemen, they are usually gentlemen, they read passages from the holy books, and they talk about how all religion is the same, and all religious faiths are actually full of love and compassion and peace, and then, as the Americans would say, they hold hands and sing Kumbaya. This goes on day after day. Every week there are interreligious dialogues in India. And frankly, I don't see how it makes any difference at all. So part of what we are trying to do at Metaculture is change the way in which the idea of dialogue is understood, and to make it more robust. Because at the end of the day, these are realities we have to deal with. We have to live in a world where people have very, very strong ideas, opinions, and we have to find a way to coexist. So, when we at Metaculture talk of our idea of change, this is a big difference. We make a distinction between diversity and multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is an ideology. Diversity is a reality. We can't wish away diversity, it's there. But multiculturalism is a very specific philosophy or ideology that has become very popular in the past 20 to 25 years. Okay? Two, the only way diversity can be managed is intelligently and realistically. And if we are unable to do that, then it's very easy for it to escalate to disputes and conflict. In other words, diversity, as I said earlier, is a bitch. It's very easy for diversity to actually implode or explode. We need very sophisticated methodologies to deal with the issue of coexistence. And we believe that it requires honest, courageous, non-ideological processes. That we can't shy away from it. There's nothing romantic about dealing with diversity. And unfortunately, in my experience, too many groups in too many parts of the world have actually romanticized the idea of diversity or made it ideological, like multiculturalism. And you can't prescribe it. It's too complex. So, this is from one of our Hindu Christian groups. I don't know if you've heard of this quote: for every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. You know, and yeah, let's not fall into that. So, basically, we call the process meta-dialogue, and essentially, the idea is to facilitate conversation between polarized groups. We call it an unorthodox process that is simultaneously rigorous, disciplined, serious, dangerous, empathic, playful, and silly. The idea is, if you really want to have complex dialogue with people who are very different from you, the only way you can have it is by completely getting into that conversation. The problem is most conversations happen at a cognitive level. They happen at a very limited, narrow level. And as a result, only parts of ourselves are in the conversation. And we are very choosy about which parts come into the conversation. This makes it very difficult for us to actually genuinely understand or engage with each other. So one of the Hindu participants who was very angry, he said, "This is the first time a Hindu government has come to power in India in over 1,000 years, after the Mughals, the British, and 60 years of pseudo-secular rule. And there will be no more appeasement of Muslims. If they feel that they are entitled to special treatment, they will not get it. This is why the Muslims are angry and feel insecure. In this government, all the religions will be treated equally." This was a statement by a right-wing Hindu participant in the dialogue, because he was talking about the fact that every other religion had their own country. The Christians had most of Europe. UK is a Christian country. The Jews have Israel. The Muslims have almost the entire Middle East. Why do 1.2 billion Hindus not have a Hindu country? Why should India be secular? And this is a feeling that really you couldn't hear it very much in the first 2 decades after independence, but now it's becoming more common. So, as I said, we decided to actually get this process started. We were lucky that the Netherlands Embassy in Delhi funded it for 2 years. We self-funded it for 1 year. In fact, we funded it for 6 months before the Netherlands Embassy actually funded it for 2 years. And then after they left, we funded it for another 6 months. So this is really why we do what we do. And we call it creating a sustainable process where religious communities can develop relationships and interdependencies necessary for sustained peaceful coexistence and to build resilience to polarization and violence. The key here is interdependencies. There's been a lot of research that shows that the greater the interdependencies in a community, economic, social interdependencies, when violence or potential violence breaks out, there is less likely for bloodshed. The greater people are connected, more people are connected. Ghettoization is a guarantee that actually violence and in fact massacres can take place. Okay? There was an Indian-born academic. There is an Indian-born academic. His name is Ashutosh Varshni. He's a senior professor at Brown University in the US. And he's done some particular, rather tremendous amount of research on what prevents large-scale violence in certain communities, or cities, and what creates the climate for greater conflict in other cities. And this is one of the things that he talked about. The other thing that's very important is building resilience to polarization and violence. We have to be realistic about the fact that there will always be groups or individuals who benefit from conflict and violence. So, to wish that all humans will actually become wonderful and peace-loving is not particularly useful. I don't find it useful. I find it useful to strengthen communities so that when troublemakers come to stir things up, they have the strength and the resilience to withstand. We believe that structured dialogue can radically alter relationships between the communities. And finally, it's important when people come to the dialogue that it's a safe platform where they can take risks and not be afraid of either offending or failing. The key is taking risks. You cannot have a conversation if you don't, an honest conversation, even between you and your spouse, or boyfriend or girlfriend, if you do not both take risks. This is fundamental. And in order to do that, people have to get out of their comfort zones and be able to have focused, honest, and open conversations on difficult issues that usually most people stay away from. So dialogue, there is nothing safe about dialogue. I personally believe dialogue is completely subversive. Most of us don't have dialogue most of the time. And official dialogues, when they happen, are masked by politeness, disingenuity, pretense, and diplomatic dancing. Totally useless. Because people go back from it with no value from the conversation. And finally, to gain clarity, this is an important word. To increase the clarity with which we see issues. Of course, build relationships and negotiate. And not just to debate theological issues. Because when it's a question of coexistence, the more you start straying towards theology, the conversation becomes a very, very different one. At the end of the day, you have to coexist with your neighbor, regardless of what the scriptures tell you, or how finely you can nuance the scriptures. So, very quickly, the Christian dialogue. We had 20 key individuals representing religious institutions, government, police, media, and civil society. These were some of the institutions that were represented. These were the Christian institutions. The RSS and the VHP are considered right-wing Hindu organizations. And very rarely in our inter-religious dialogues do they show up. It took us 6 months to get them to the table. So this is the other thing. If you want to have a real dialogue, you have to spend a lot of time and energy to get the right people to the table. Without the right people, you don't have a real dialogue. You can get enough Hindus and Christians or Muslims in a room, but if they all by and large agree with each other, what is the point? What is the point? You can have a party instead. Okay? So, and one of the issues that was really, really critical, I want to just take a couple of minutes to say the primary tension between Hindu groups and Christian groups. Can anybody guess what it is? The primary conflict between Hindu and Christian groups. What do you think it might be? Economic? Anybody else? Conversion. Evangelizing. You see, one of the biggest problems that the Hindu groups have with Christians is the Christian missionaries are evangelical, particularly not so much the mainstream churches right now. Catholic priests are not as overtly evangelizing, but the many Protestant groups are. And what the Hindu groups accuse them of is going to the poorest sections of society and offering them inducements to convert. We will give you education. We will give you a better house. We will make sure you have food if you become Christian. And this is an accusation that has been leveled against Christian missionaries for a very, very long time. The other problem the Hindus have with the Christians is Christians do this by denigrating Hindu religion. Oh, it's not a real religion. It's all tribal. It's very unsophisticated. It's barbaric because you have everything is a god. A stone is a god. A tree is a god. The real God is only one, and Jesus is his messenger. Oh, his son. Sorry. I'm suddenly confusing Jesus with Muhammad. Not a good idea. Okay, so this is a huge issue that the Hindus have with Christians. And so it's very interesting. So one of the Christian participants said, "Why are you so disturbed that I consider my religion to the best? Are you afraid it might be true?" And that's, can you imagine if you're a right-wing Hindu and you hear that? That will really help coexistence. But you know the other interesting thing about meta-dialogue? We insist on people saying the truth even if they offend each other. Because only if you allow it can real dialogue take place. We do not prevent strong statements from being shared. Okay, and this is nothing. There are much stronger statements that are shared by, in our dialogues. But that's where we create safety. We allow for the management of extremely offensive speech in the dialogue. Otherwise, there's no point. They will kill themselves, or a church will be burnt, or people will die if you don't know how to manage this. And that is our skill. And one of the Hindu, actually quite a few Hindus said something similar to this. I find it illogical for anyone to say that one religion is better than another. I find it to be mischief, anti-life, and completely threatening. How can anyone say that one cup of coffee is better than another without tasting both cups of coffee? Okay? So, in this, over 1 year, we had 6 sessions. Oh, sorry. We had, before we started, this was an interesting experiment we did. Because, okay, I'll tell you something about Indian society. We are a 5,000-year-old culture. There are many wonderful things about Indian society. But one thing we don't have is, we are very bad listeners. We don't know how to listen to each other. Our biggest problem in any dialogue or any conflict resolution process is first teaching Indians how to listen. If you, it's kind of, you put a group of Indians together, they will all talk at the same time. And about 10 different issues, all at the same time. And as long as I can talk about my issue for 15 minutes, I go back thinking, what a great conversation. Even though you've been talking about something else. It doesn't matter. So, we actually spent 6 sessions with each faith community, a total of 12 sessions, training them how to listen and how to participate effectively in a dialogue. Now, don't get me wrong, these are not poor people, uneducated people. These were doctors and engineers and army generals and NGO heads. These were senior influential people, many of them Western educated. And we got them to start talking about stereotypes, prejudices, grievances, and tensions that they hold about the other. We did this for almost 8 to 9 months before we brought them together. So there was a tremendous amount of back-end work that we did with this community separately to prepare them for the dialogue. You will find that when we came to the Hindu-Muslim, we didn't spend as much time, but there's another reason for it. Here we spent a tremendous amount of time getting people used to the idea of dialogue, where we encouraged them to say everything that was important. Nothing was taboo. Nothing was taboo. And our responsibility was to create an environment of radical honesty and yet maintain a sense of safety. We wanted them to understand that this is a different culture of discourse. It's not our normal conversation where we are trying to save face, or we are trying to be polite, or we are going ballistic. So this is a very, very lovely photograph. Incidentally, our dialogue is not just talking. We get the groups to do interesting projects together. We use art, we use creative exercises. And this was an exercise where this gentleman is a lovely Catholic, very senior Catholic priest. And you can see the marks on this man. That's a mark of a Orthodox Hindu. He's a PhD, recently graduated PhD. And the job was to use, I mean, for the Catholic priest to hold the pen. No, the Hindu to hold the pen, and to have the Catholic priest draw an image using the hand of the Hindu. And they had to coordinate their hands, otherwise the Catholic priest would not be able to actually draw the image. So we use a lot of exercises to get people to start experiencing intimacy and collaboration. How do you cooperate? Okay, so some of these are actually fairly safe. They have nothing to do with religion, but it gets them. Remember, there are 20 people sitting there, or 25 people sitting there, and they start experiencing what it is like to engage with a very different kind of intimacy with the other. We also do something very important. We believe that unless you know what's happening in you, your biology, you can't even control or understand the emotions that come up in you. We teach them about brain science, about the neuroscience of conflict. We give them, it's not academic, but we make it very interesting for them to understand. For instance, which parts of their brain are activated by a sense of threat, or a sense of, for instance, emotions, or when their neocortex works and when they can start becoming rational. We help them understand what's happening in their brain at a biological level. Use science. This is mind-blowing for most people because, oh my God, they didn't know this. And particularly, I don't know, I'm sure you folks are very savvy about this, but in the last 15 to 20 years, the advance in neuroscience is spectacular. And it, especially for people who are passionate about working with people and conflict resolution, it's so useful. So we actually educate people about how chemicals and the biology affect the way we feel things and the way we behave. As I said, we help develop many of these skills. And all this happens at two levels. One is before the dialogue, as well as during the dialogue. We actually stop the dialogue, time out, and say, so which part of your brain is working right now? What are the chemicals that are flowing in? So we get them to become conscious, not only of the issues, but also about what is happening at a biological or chemical level. This makes an extraordinary difference. People start using that language. Oh, your limbic brain is acting up again. Or that's your reptilian brain. Now let me see your neocortex. It's very powerful. As I said, Indians are not just bad listeners. We don't ask questions. The only kind of questions we ask is, how could you do that? In other words, our questions are to test or to attack. They are not to learn. They are not questions born out of curiosity. So this is something we genuinely have to teach people how to do. And finally, critical thinking. Questioning is also critical thinking. But how do you know that your facts, what you call facts, are really facts? What are the, how can you substantiate it? What are the biases that you have behind the inferences and the conclusions that you make? So when we talk of dialogue, meta-dialogue is a complex process where we help people to have really informed conversations. Not just about the topic, but about who they are and what they bring to the conversation. This makes all the difference. So when we finally brought them together, we had 11 sessions in all. That's over 11 months. Over 11 months, we had a session a month. And these were some of the themes that were discussed. I won't go into details, but Orthodox Hindus consider that Christianity is a foreign religion and it's not Indian, and their allegiance is to the Vatican, not anything in India. That they denigrate Hindu culture, that Hindus get very angry on what they see is Christian sense of religious superiority. This is very linked with the colonization and the notion of the colonial, the missionaries coming on the backs of the British or Portuguese or Dutch soldiers. Very interestingly, they saw conversion as emotional violence on their culture. But the Christians said, look, even if we are just trying to be nice, you think we are trying to convert. So if I see someone suffering, a Catholic priest said, I went to help the boy, and immediately a crowd came and accused me of converting. I said, nobody was helping that boy. The boy was suffering. All I was trying to do was be a good human being. And you suspect even that. That when there are attacks against the Christians, the Hindu majority is silent. Why are you silent? Why don't you protest when militant groups commit violence? And the very interesting thing, in India, Christians are supposed to have loose morals. Can you guess why? Huh? Absolutely. It's a very simple way of painting an entire culture because of the Western, shall we say, roots of Christianity. And it's more likely that a Christian will wear Western clothes, especially Christian women. A dress or pants, the more conservative Hindus are not likely to wear it. And that's seen as a sign of breaking gender stereotypes and the liberation of women. So another Hindu participant, I don't like that you Christians think it is your moral obligation to save me from my inferior religion. You're not my doctors, you don't need to fix me. This is an infringement of my autonomy. So some of the highlights of this, and this finished a year and a half ago. One of the participants, throughout these sessions my faith was challenged and I totally appreciated it. One very interesting thing happened. The Hindus and Christians, while during the dialogue, they organized celebrations for their counterparts on Diwali, which is a Hindu festival, and on Christmas. So the Christians organized a special Christmas event for the Hindu counterparts and vice versa. These are useful. I don't think that they are very far-reaching in terms of their impact. Then an interesting thing that also happened is there was a conversation that happened between a series of conversations between a Hindu participant and a Christian participant, which actually became very, very heated. And because of our background as conflict resolution people, we brought them out of the group and we had a mediation between them in order to actually help them go back into the group and function at a constructive level. What we do is we try to transfer ownership of the process. So we tell people, look, we can do it for a certain period of time, but you must think this process is important to do it yourself. Otherwise, we are always holding your hand, and that isn't useful. So we try to, we are in the process of trying to get them to actually continue their conversations. It's not always very mature, but the fact is we encourage them to continue the dialogue and initiate other activities. One of the biggest problems that the group faces is they haven't been able to find financial support with to do this. But we do encourage them and get involved where possible. Now I move to the Hindu-Muslim. It will be difficult, but I want just one religion. My religion because it's perfect. Everyone should subscribe to it. Just like how everyone should get clean water and air, a good Muslim wants for others what we want for ourselves. So I want everyone to be Muslim. This is a fairly common sentiment from many Muslims. One of the things that I should say here is the difference between the Abrahamic religions, the monotheistic religions, and definitely Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, is not only are these Eastern religions not proselytizing religions, they tend to be far more accepting of the idea that God can be found through various paths. So one of the real tensions that the Hindu right wing has is, at one level they are very intolerant of other religions. Not because they think theirs is the right religion. They don't want the other religions occupying too much of space in India. But at the same time, they are very proud of the fact that Hinduism is more inclusive and accepting of other religions. So that's a tension that many of the right-wing groups have. And this is something that both Muslims and Christians actually point out. If you're so tolerant, why are you violent towards us? And that's where the politics comes in. So this is, the Hindu-Muslim is very different from the Hindu-Christian. And this is important. One, they are the largest minority. They are about 150 million people. What's the population of Austria?
Like Bangalore, 8 million.
Bangalore, 8 million is understating it. So, can you imagine a minority that's 150 million? That's not a minority anymore. Okay? This is intense, deep-rooted, pervasive, and complicated. The present Prime Minister, we started this dialogue before he became the Prime Minister. And people were very, very nervous. Muslims were very nervous about him becoming Prime Minister. And they were starting to feel insecure, and therefore there was a sense of urgency that the dialogue should start with the Hindus. This is two Hindus flanked by respected Muslim gentlemen at iftar meet that they organize during the course of the dialogue. So one of the Hindu participants, when I think of Muslims, I think of Osama bin Laden, Aurangzeb, who was a very, very, supposed to be a very tyrannical Mughal emperor, who was very orthodox, and Dawood Ibrahim, who was a mafia don, who is now hiding out in Pakistan, who was responsible for the Mumbai blasts in '92. So I think of Osama bin Laden, Aurangzeb, and Dawood Ibrahim, all very violent people. The problem here is that there are so many violent perceptions of Muslims, and even if Muslims themselves change, it will be very difficult to change these negative perceptions. So here, the participants, again, we were actually very, very lucky here. We got some really hardcore Hindu groups, as well as the main Islamic body, the Jamaat-e Islami, which is a very Islamist body, and many other, including the students' body, Student Islamic Organization, which is at many levels, some of their members are seen as or as accused of taking part in terrorist activities. So these are some of the issues that were discussed. One, this is a big issue with the Hindus. If you are a Muslim in India, is your loyalty to the Indian state, the Ummah, or the Quran? The Ummah, does anybody know what the Ummah is? The global brotherhood of Islam. Are you really going to be loyal to the state, your people outside the country, or to the Quran? And the key question that they ask is, in an emergency, when there is a war against India, who will you support? Who will you support? This, for the Hindu nationalist, is a huge issue. How can we trust you if, because Pakistan is, or Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country, you will support them and not India? the Muslims were worried about the question of, what do I have to be Indian? I am an Indian citizen, I hold an Indian passport, my loyalties are here, but you don't think I'm Indian enough. Hindus are very, very nervous about the Sharia law and the fact that the Muslims seem to be, have always opposed a common civil code. In India, Muslims are allowed their own personal law for divorce and other marriage issues. This has been a very big problem. Even though the Supreme Court said it must be one law, the Muslim lobby fought, and Rajiv Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister in the 80s, he, for political gain, to keep the Muslim vote, he actually agreed to have a separate law, which means Muslim women can't even get the kind of protection after divorce. Maintenance is difficult for them to get. And because the Muslim law is very favored against, it is weighed against the woman. So the Hindus have a big problem with that. Of course, 600 to 800 years of Muslim invasions and rule. The fact that the Muslims continue to actually separate themselves through clothing, food, practices, etc. And of course, the fact that Mr. Narendra Modi, our Prime Minister, was accused of not doing enough to stop the riots where more than 2,000 people died, and according to the Muslims that he was responsible for that. There have been many other issues that lie between the Hindus and the Muslims. So another Muslim, if Hindus are feeling a sense of insecurity about the downfall of Hinduism, I find it very strange that they blame Islam and Christianity to mask the weakness in their society. So, there's been a tremendous amount of engagement between the Hindus and the Muslims. So I won't go into too much of this, but for the first time they were able to actually sit across and engage with each other. Another Hindu grievance. Both Christianity and Islam have expanded across the world through extremely hegemonic and violent means. Whichever place they invade, that place lost its indigenous cultural identity and was for the most part made to convert. I fear that the same will happen in India with Hindu culture. So there's a tremendous amount of nervousness that right-wing Hindus have and the Orthodox have. They take it out on Christians and Muslims, but part of it is also insecurity about globalization. Everything is changing around here. The family is not the same, practices are changing, and it's easy to see the other religions as actually affecting this. So the same thing. I'll just end with this. One of our sessions we did a very interesting exercise. We said we've been hearing how some things are important, other things are important for the other person. What are your negotiables and what are your non-negotiables? And we found a very interesting series of things. So for the Muslims, they are negotiable things. These are things that they are willing to give up. Special privileges in the Indian state. They are willing to actually agree to cow slaughter. This is a huge, because the cow is sacred. They are willing to actually give up. And when I say they, I mean this group. The right to call for prayer on loudspeakers. The right to run processions in public spaces, and the demand for a mosque to be rebuilt. This is what they believe they cannot negotiate on. Uniform civil code, they don't want a uniform civil code. Freedom, they want the freedom to follow Islamic practices freely and fully. Their primary loyalty will be to Allah and the Ummah, not the state. They want the freedom to propagate Islam and convert non-Muslims. And they need all the rights that have already been given to them within the constitution, and the constitution should not be amended. So the interesting thing here is some of these may not be too much of a problem, but the Hindus have a huge problem, and we will see what that is. Some right-wing movement, this is a fringe exercise, they are trying to reconvert Hindus to Christians and Muslims to Hinduism, which is kind of like almost farcical, but there are some people who, it's a great photo op, okay? They want a uniform civil code, but these are negotiable. They are willing to stop reconversion, and they are also willing to give up on the burqa. Right now they have a problem with it, but they're willing to give up on Muslims wearing that. But these are their non-negotiables. Primary loyalty of Muslims must be to the Indian state, not to the Quran or Ummah. Here you find that this is definitely going to clash with this group. Cow slaughter must be outlawed, no problem. These guys are willing to do that. Public proclamations of the superiority of the Muslim God should be banned. The idea that there is only one God and He is Allah, they have a problem with the public proclamation. They don't have a problem with Muslims believing it, but through their loudspeakers and everything else, they believe that is offensive to them. It marginalizes their beliefs. And the public discrediting of any aspect of Indian heritage, of Indian heritage or culture should not be allowed. This is a problem they have with Christians and Muslims, because both the monotheistic religions actually really ride on the fact that they are the only true faith. And Hinduism being at least technically more inclusive, they are offended by the fact that you think ours is not. And then there's the colonial aspect of it, which is the West having problems with Eastern practices, cultural practices and things like that. So this is a matter that is quite a problem. Okay, so this is the last one I'm gonna just focus on. So what is necessary, we believe, is continuing dialogue and consensus building based on this model involving the different communities, because otherwise, and we believe it's necessary to replicate this in other cities so that this kind of complex understanding and genuine bridge building can happen. So can we have the lights on? Okay, so I'm going to stop here. Any thoughts or questions? And I hope you have some.
I'm sure we have quite a number of questions here, so everybody's invited.
And you can question my model too. Please.
I'd like to put two questions. The first of these two questions is, you have to note that I'm a member of the Roman Catholic School of Theology here at this university. They told us that theological debates are not very fruitful for the interreligious dialogue. So what do you think about theology? What can theology or the theologians do for a real good dialogue? Not to debate on theological issues, but what they have to do. What do they have to do?
Okay, I'm not a theologian, so I will try to answer that to the best of my ability. I believe a greater awareness and sensitivity to theological nuances and complexity is necessary. In our dialogues, we find it a distraction, not because it's not important, because once the conversation goes there, it becomes very difficult to actually have conversations about coexistence. Because on one point of, for instance, what the Quran really means about X, the whole conversation can get hijacked. I believe such conversation, theological conversations, need to happen in separate fora. That's what I believe. Second, especially this is my personal view, theologians who are ecumenical, who believe in the coexistence of different faiths, I think they have an incredible, not responsibility, but opportunity to engage primarily their own faith members, and particularly the more rigid orthodox groups within their, in order to create a climate for coexistence. And I wish that more of that would happen. I'll be honest, particularly with Islam. If Islamic theologians would actually take a more active step, I think it could revolutionize the Islam issue globally. And yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
Thank you very much. The second question is, you told us that the main problem in the Hindu-Christian dialogue is conversion. Conversion. But what is the main problem in the Hindu-Muslim dialogue?
there are multiple main problems there. It's a huge issue. And I'll be honest with you, I personally believe there are about 2 to 3 primary problems in India. One, of course, India is going to get hit very badly by global warming. 2, the rich-poor divide or economic inequality, as well as instability of the economy is going to play havoc. 3 is the Hindu-Muslim issue. Hindu-Christian issue is not going to tear the country. Muslims are too small. Hindus don't have too many problems with the Muslim. It's an ego issue for Hindus. You think we are inferior. You think your God is the only God. And you try to convert our poor people by offering them money. That is the Hindu problem with the Christians. But with Muslims, it is cultural. It's hundreds of years of perceived insults. Many Hindu temples have been defaced because Muslims don't respect idols, like the Afghan statues. If you go to most Hindu temples, old ones, they've been ravaged by Muslim invaders. So this is the Hindu-Muslim issue is so deep-rooted. Unless we know how to handle it, it's going to explode. It's going to explode. You know? Yeah. Yes.
Thanks a lot for your really interesting presentation, which I just like to build up on the previous question. Like the question of proselytization. You mentioned that the Hindu community has a huge problem with it, a rather huge problem. But then how do the monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam or the Muslims respond to that? And particularly could you dwell on that, like with regard to the freedom of religion, which is also enshrined in the Indian constitution, and the last part, in particular, the role of the Indian Supreme Court, in particular its very social and political role, which is compared to other countries, like far more enhanced and far more elaborated in India.
Great. Very well-informed question about India. You know a lot about India. So, the first thing, freedom of religion is enshrined in the constitution. It's very clear. The Hindu groups, when I say Hindu, I'm talking extreme Hindu groups, okay, or very orthodox groups. Their biggest problem, they say, is conversion through inducement, by giving monetary or material benefits, which they say, India being a poor country, the poor cannot resist if somebody offers them something to convert. As far as I know, the courts have always come down in favor of maintaining the complete right to practice your faith as well as to preach it. So the courts have backed it. There are two issues here. One is the legal one, which at this point in time is fairly safe. The other one is perception. And the perception is the one that is more dangerous. If enough extremist Hindu groups believe that Christians are likely to bribe poor people to become Christians, then that can create a serious issue of violence against the Christians. That's a problem. So here's what the Christian groups that we know are, how they are handling it. The mainstream Christian churches are very clear. They condemn inducement. They condemn it. The Catholic Church, and we worked very hard with the Catholic Church, they are also very clear. Denigrating Hinduism is not what they want to do, and it is not good practice. They are very clear about it. They are embarrassed by the evangelical church. They are very embarrassed by that. I'll tell you something else. When we first brought the Christians together, guess what? The split was between the evangelists and the Catholic Church. And there were some people from the mainstream churches who refused to sit on the same table, around the same table with the Seventh-day Adventists or the Mormons, saying, these are not Christians. It took us a long time to try to keep some of the evangelicals there. So the Hindu participants, I think they appreciate the problem that the mainstream churches have. They can't control the fringe groups. They can't control it. Sorry, yes.
No, I just wanted to come in on that in a second when you're finished.
Okay, so this is one of the problems. Now, Hindus are not worried about Islamic conversions. They do have a problem with certain Islamic, shall we say, rules or laws. Like, if a Muslim marries a non-Muslim, they have to convert to Islam. So, the Hindus say, why? Shouldn't they decide whether they want the Muslim to convert to Hinduism or the Hindu to convert to Muslim? Shouldn't there be freedom of choice? But no. Muslims are very clear that if a Muslim gets married to someone else, they have to convert. Otherwise, you are out of the family. Yeah.
Just one last brief note. Just to be clear, the Hindu community doesn't really have a problem with conversion as such, just merely with the inducement, right?
That is what they say.
Okay.
That is what they say. I personally believe that they are not very happy with Christian conversions, particularly in the Northeast, where there are some states where the majority are Christians. And this is, I think, not something they're very happy about. But given that the Indian Constitution is very clear on that, their public protest is with inducements.
Yeah, you're talking about Hindu groups, you're talking about evangelical groups and so on, and you talk about the Muslims. Muslim are also groups. I mean, you have also very different groups of Muslims, and in that context, my question is about the role of hierarchy or the lack of hierarchy. When you organize dialogue, yeah, and the first question was on that, I think interreligious dialogue between religious leaders can have an importance because it gives a message to their various groups that this is possible, first of all, that it is important, etc., etc. But then certainly it should happen among the different people and groups. But it's so complicated when you imagine that we have actually in all of these different phases more radical groups, moderate groups, liberal groups, and what have you. In this very room we have organized for a couple of years meetings between Muslims and Christians And what it turned out was that there was more dialogue or more need for dialogue among the Muslim groups than between the Muslim and Christians, because they are so, how should I say, diversified among themselves. And this brings me to my concern, and this is how can you be successful, so to say, in dialogue, if you always have some groups who say, I don't want to be part of that, I cannot go so far as this, yeah? And in the end you cannot include everybody, because this would mean that you would have to follow some extremist or fundamentalist positions as well, yeah? So you have to look for some middle ground, but then the others will not join.
This is a challenge.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is, amongst the Muslim groups that we work with, it's very interesting. Okay, when we brought the Muslims and the Hindus together, we had to throw out a lot of Hindus, because the average middle-class Hindu was by definition secular. Hinduism, they had a take it or leave it approach towards Hinduism. Yeah, sometimes I'm Hindu. Whereas for the Muslim and the Christian, being from that faith was very important. So we had to get rid of some Hindus who were not real believers. Because for this dialogue, we wanted people who genuinely believed in their faith. So that's one. We also realized that both in the 2007 dialogue as well as the recent one major difference between Christians and Hindus at one level and Muslim participants on another level is that many Christians, not all, and definitely many Hindus could critique their own religions and practices. Very difficult to find a Muslim who could critique his own. Very difficult. In fact, the mainstream within the community, within the dialogue, most of the participants, we had a very interesting situation where they were, most of the Muslims were very orthodox, and there was one man who was very quiet all through the dialogue. And finally when he talked, he said, and this is, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I don't agree with all the others. So we thought, okay, here's a more liberal Muslim. And he says, they are all wishy-washy Muslims. I'm the only real one. And then he started talking about how he believes, he called himself an Islamist. He said, basically the whole world needs to be Islamic. And so it's very interesting that the range from liberal to extreme in Christians and in Hindus, the continuum was very, very wide. But amongst Muslims, it was here. Orthodox to extreme.
First, let me thank you for your speech. I appreciate it very much. I'm interested in your team. What religions are built up in your team? How do you work? How do you work these first sessions when you go only to the Christian community? Is there a Christian member of the team doing this?
We always try to include people from different, especially with the Christian, it's easy for us to find Christian members who are normally part of our team. Sometimes, right now, we don't have a Muslim member in our team, but until about 1 year ago we did. But there's usually a Christian member. Our biggest problem is finding Hindus. Most Hindus, educated Hindus, are so liberal and secular that they are not genuinely strong believers. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I grew up in a family where my father was religious. My parents were religious. And guess what my parents did? Every time we went out, my parents would insist I go to not only a temple, Hindu temple, but a church and a mosque. And I was confused as a child because I saw the Christian friends go only to a church and the Muslim friends go only to a mosque, and I got angry. I told my parents, why am I forced to go to 3 different places? You know, I want to play cricket and football. And they said, and I kept hearing this from my father, all religion is one, and there's only one God. It doesn't matter whether you go from Christianity or Hinduism or Islam. This was the message we got over and over again. Now, I realize this is not common for all families, but definitely there were enough people in my generation who had that experience.
Thanks a lot for your wonderful lecture. I have maybe 1 or 2 questions to the way how you deal directly the process. You talked about throwing out some of the participants, or you said during the lecture that you have to look for the right participants. How can you find the right participant, and how do you deal with this situation to say go out of this process?
We are terrible people. Yeah.
But I think it's not really easy to do that.
It is not.
So how does it work without destroying your process? So
Wonderful
this is the first question. Maybe you can.
Can I handle this first before you ask the next question? Great question. This is not the only time we've thrown people out. Before I do that, I need to confess something. As mediators and facilitators, we are very clear, we do not control the outcome. What you talk about and what you want to do is your problem. It's not our problem. So inter-religions, if you are Hindus and Christians, if you want to kill each other, that's your problem. I'm not coming here saying we must have peace. I am not invested in the outcome. Because the moment I'm invested in the outcome, I know people will try to manipulate in order for me to get the outcome I want. So I don't allow that. I say, if after this you want to kill each other, no. But I'll tell you what I have complete control over, process. I tell them, and this is in all my work, whether it's religious or corporate work or whatever, I say, my job is to make sure you have a fantastic conversation. My job is to provide the platform and the ground rules and to enable and to step in and facilitate an honest, completely open conversation. If any of you create a problem within the process, I will guide you as to how else you could do it. I will coach you, I will train you, I will teach you, I will facilitate. If you mess with the process, I'll throw you out. I'm serious. I've learned this the hard way. And so we threw out those Hindus, not for any other reason, but they came there talking of love and peace. I don't want people who want to talk about love and peace in my work, in my dialogue, because they come thinking everything is fine. I want people who disagree to be at the table, because that's what this dialogue is for. Because there are some secular Hindus who are willing to, and it's not just Hindus, there were a couple of, in other dialogues there are other people we've had, who come there and they don't believe there's a problem. They think, yes, we are all human beings, we get along well with each other, I don't see why there's a problem. And then I say, don't waste your time here. If you are here, it's because you believe that there is a tension, if not a conflict, between two religious groups, and you want to do something about it. But if you say there's no problem, it's like going to a doctor and saying, I don't have any health problems. Then the doctor will say, why are you wasting your money? Go away. So I take that stance. We've had this actually quite a few times with senior military or army people, very senior people, particularly retired people. They come and they say, two people told us, in the army there is no problem. Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Sikhs, We all fight for the nation, and I will give my life to a Christian or a Muslim, no problem. Society does not know how to deal with these problems. We should deal with it like the army. You focus on the flag, you focus on the nation, and nothing else matters. So we tell them, look, in the army you can have a command and control model. You can't command and control civil society. So we've had to actually ask a couple of those people also to leave. So I don't know if that, my primary allegiance is to the process.
No, I'm glad to meet you tomorrow at the Center of Social Competence, so we can discuss a lot during the
Absolutely.
Maybe some
Sure.
of you want to take part in our workshops tomorrow.
Please come.
And the day after.
We'll
tomorrow.
talk about negotiation.
Yeah, negotiation tomorrow, and humor and the mediation the day after,
Day after.
tomorrow. So we have really great topics. But maybe one question more. You said we make the dialogue more robust. And you do it like that you separate the groups, and then you give them a kind of listening stereotype training, a kind of conflict training, to make them fit for the dialogue. Did I understand that right? And then you bring the groups after they have the training together. They can discuss at the dialogue, and afterwards, then you have maybe a wonderful, not you but your group, got a wonderful resolution. Then how will they bring this resolution to their other
communities,
participants? How can you bring that out? Or is there a part of the process where you can go with them to the
Okay, so
a lot of questions.
Lot of questions. I've forgotten the first part.
Okay.
So here's what we say first, and I believe, even when I do this in the West, I find it useful to do a little bit of, if not training, orientation. This is not a coffee house conversation. It's different. It's a serious conversation. It's a conversation where you will feel angry, you will feel offended, you can shut down. So how do you not do any of that? Okay, so, something's happening. Not what I want to happen, but it looks very good this way. I think the computer is slow, right?
Extremely slow.
Okay, I think it's woken up. Okay.
Well, good
So,
morning.
Can I just, I know I've gone way over time, but this, you might find this useful if you're interested in. So we say there are 6 elements, key elements to meta-dialogue. The first is, how do you establish, how do you make sure there is constructive communication? Because communication is important, but most of the time what passes off as communication is actually not communication. So, if I talk to you for half an hour, that's not communication. I call it broadcasting.
If you talk to us for 2 hours, is it
Then
conversation?
that's homicide. I'm killing you. Okay, so communication, we help people understand that this is a complex process. Just because we talk over beer, it doesn't become communication. And we do things to ensure that honest communication without fear. This is where I'll talk about something which is very, very disturbing for me today, particularly even before Charlie Hebdo. But another area that I'm very interested in is the whole issue of what does it take to create a culture of democracy? So in most countries, democracy is just an ability to vote once in 4 years or 5 years and elect a dictator, a leader who can handle things for the next 4 or 5 years. That's a very poor, superficial kind of democracy. Real democracy is participative. And if you really want to manage diversity, You cannot manage diversity without participative democracy. How do you design participative processes? Through dialogue. Dialogue is the only participative process. And in dialogue, the only thing that matters is freedom to express. Or the main thing that matters is freedom to express. So the more we start chopping down the right of people to say things that is offensive to someone else, the more you're shutting down dialogue. And this is a huge problem. So, communication. The second, it's very important to create an emotionally comfortable environment. We are not talking of safety here. We are talking of comfort. One of the things we've realized is people will feel very comfortable even if they are disagreeing with each other. Even if they are hearing things that are terrible, if they trust the process. I don't have to like you, but if I trust the space, you can tell me anything. And part of my job as a facilitator is to help you trust my process and this space. That's when you don't have to worry about offending. And without offending, there is no real dialogue. If you're polite, you're destroying the dialogue. This is the essence of dialogue. Storytelling. This is a funny one. Can you read it? I think that's also a joke on American Jews like Woody Allen, who are constantly in angst. Anyway, so the importance of stories. And some of the most powerful experiences we have. I'll give you one example. In the Hindus and the Christians, at one point, I think by the 6th or 7th session, the Christians asked the Hindus, why are you keeping on talking about Christians denigrating Hindus? We don't do it ourselves. Why are you obsessed with the fact that you think that Christians treat Hindus as second-class people? And there were 10 Hindus, and one by one, they started talking about their personal experience in Christian schools, in Christian hospitals, with Christian employers, or in communities. And they gave their personal example of how they felt humiliated. So the Christians wanted to immediately jump in. I said, "Don't. I want you to ask questions before you can respond." So the Christians asked more questions. This is where, as a facilitator, I actually bring the process and I structure it. So the Christians asked questions and the Hindus responded. And then I asked the Christians again. I said, now that you heard the Hindu stories, can you acknowledge what you heard the Hindus say? Don't react. Don't say that's a fringe group. Don't say, no, 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 it doesn't happen. Just respond through acknowledgement. You don't have to agree with them. And I'm almost done. One by one, the Christians started telling the Hindus what they heard from the Hindus about their pain and their humiliation. And one of the members, one of the most hardcore extremist Hindus there, from the RSS, which was once a banned organization in India, after he heard the Christians, he actually stood up and he looked at the senior-most Christian and he said, I have never been acknowledged like this in my life. If you told me your story, I can guarantee you no Hindu would have been able to acknowledge the way you acknowledged us. Thank you so much. It is powerful. Powerful. So I'll just, Lisa has already told me that I should move on. I'll just quickly do this. So these are the 6 elements. The third element is, without critical thinking, any dialogue is superficial. You have to help people really think in a robust way. Creativity is important because people should understand how they can use their imagination to understand the conflict as well as the possibilities inherent in conflict. My favorite. It's important to bring humor into the dialogue. Just because you're talking about serious, very, almost potentially violent things, it doesn't mean we cannot laugh at ourselves as well as with others. It's very powerful. So we always make it important or make it possible for people to bring lightness and laughter into this. Okay. Frankly, I think this is brilliant modern art, isn't it? I think the composition is excellent. I'm just going to leave it there. So, okay. Thank you. Any last question? One question more?
Maybe we can ask the question outside what is the buffet and
There's buffet. Okay.
I think this was excellent and it deserves a big applause. About the methodology for a true dialogue, and this is what is crucial. I found it also very interesting that towards the end you emphasized once again the importance of freedom of expression. I just was in this dialogue between EU and Arabic states, and they said, you know, but how can you criticize our religion? We feel offended and so on. And then they said, yes, but freedom of expression also means that you can offend, that you can shock, that you can disturb, as the European Court of Human Rights said in 1976 already. That's difficult for them to accept, but it is important that there is this freedom. And I think the culture of discourse, which you have explained to us, is maybe also to be linked to, or very similar to what we would call a culture of human rights. Because when we talk about human rights, it means first of all to respect the other. It's human dignity. And this is actually the basis for the whole culture of human rights. So in such a culture, also a culture of discourse should be possible. But now I think the culture of discourse, as Lisa said, should continue outside. I use the opportunity to thank Lisa and the whole team, which has been preparing this event so well that they even thought that we would be hungry and thirsty afterwards and prepared something for that purpose.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this whole thing together.